Hello everyone, welcome back to Real Life. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you to all of you subscribers and members. There's plenty of members-only episodes to enjoy and more to come. Your support is appreciated. Today's episode is 15 minutes of footage I captured in 1997 of Currie Barracks as the various military units were relocating to Garrison Edmonton. I took advantage of the brief period when there was still some military presence. After the First World War, Canada's permanent forces in southern Alberta were serviced largely out of Mawata armories and at stables rented from the city of Calgary. In the early 1930s, it became clear that a larger facility would be needed to house and administer the regimental headquarters, as well as other units such as B Squadron of the Lord Strathcona Horse Royal Canadians. To this end, the Currie Barracks site was planned and built on what was then the southwest edge of Calgary's city limits. As the facility grew with intensive periods of construction from the 1930s through the 1950s, so did the relationship of Canada's armed forces to the general public. Numerous military units, such as the PPCLI, the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada, called Currie Barracks home. It became headquarters for the 1st Canadian Infantry Brigade Group in 1958 and until 1997, when the base was decommissioned, was home to its successor, 1st Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group. The Currie Barracks site was constructed with funding allocated by the Public Works Construction Act of 1934, a depression relief measure. $1.2 million was set aside for the barracks and an aerodrome project, and in 1935, a further $400,000 was granted. This major project not only allowed for the necessary facilities to be built for Canada's military, but also provided employment for hundreds of out-of-work people, mostly men, during the most difficult years of the Great Depression. When hundreds of permanent married quarters, or PMQs, were built adjacent to the barracks site in the late 1940s and early 1950s, the work had a similar positive impact on Calgary's labour force. The facility was named after the recently deceased General Sir Arthur Currie, commander of the Canadian Expeditionary Force on the Western Front during the First World War. In 1938, No. 1 Fighter Squadron and No. 3 Bomber Squadron moved to Currie Barracks from RCAF Station Ottawa, Rockcliffe, and occupied the hangar line portion of the barrack that later became RCAF Station Lincoln Park. During the Second World War, a triangular airstrip was constructed on the property south of the barracks. 2 British Commonwealth Air Training Plan stations operated out of the facility. No. 3 Service Flying Training School, with 7 hangars on the north end of the strip, and No. 10 Repair Depot, with 11 hangars on the south end of the strip. The airstrip was officially closed in 1964 and was removed several years later and is now home to Mount Royal University. During the Second World War, Currie Barracks became an Army training centre for units mobilized in southern Alberta. It was designated A-16 Canadian Infantry Training Centre. These mobilized units were tasked to provide reinforcements for many Canadian Army units. Following the war in 1946, Currie Barracks became home to the Lord Strathcona Horse Royal Canadians and the 1st Battalion PPCLI as part of Canada's transition to having an expanded regular force army during the early years of the Cold War. Currie Barracks underwent rapid expansion during the Korean War as the facility transformed into a major military centre, owing to its convenient access to the Canadian Pacific Railway's transcontinental mainline to Vancouver, 3 kilometres to the north. Headquarters Calgary Garrison was formed on 26 October 1950 in response to the need to coordinate the administration of Army units stationed at and cycling through Currie Barracks. Thus, the facility also began to use the names Calgary Garrison and Calgary Barracks. The pending unification of the Royal Canadian Navy, Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Air Force to form the Canadian Forces on 1 February 1968 precipitated several major changes to Canada's military. As a result, Currie Barracks was redesignated Canadian Forces Base Calgary, CFB Calgary, on 14 March 1966. As a former Canadian Army facility, the newly designated CFB Calgary fell under Force Mobile Command, the new command for Canada's land forces. Camp Wainwright, 300 kilometers northeast of Calgary, became a satellite auxiliary training camp under the jurisdiction of CFB Calgary on 1 January 1967. However, the facility became a separately controlled base, CFB Wainwright, on August 1 of that year. CFB Calgary was reorganized by Mobile Command on 20 February 1969 when one combat group was combined with the base itself. Both the base and one combat group reported to a single commander. The base was tasked with providing administrative and support services to units posted to it in support of one combat group operations. It was announced in the 1996 federal budget that CFB Calgary would be closed in 1998 as part of the policy to close various Canadian Forces bases to consolidate units into fewer facilities. In 1998, CFB Calgary was officially decommissioned, with most of its personnel relocated to CFB Edmonton in Edmonton, Alberta. Despite the closure of CFB Calgary in 1998, 3 reserve force units of the Canadian Army remain at the site. These units consist of Headquarters 41 Canadian Brigade Group, 41 Service Battalion, and 41 Engineer Regiment. As well, 2 corps of the Royal Canadian Army Cadets, 2554 Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry Royal Canadian Army Cadet Corps, and 1292 Lord Strathcona Horse Royal Canadian Army Cadet Corps continue to train at the old base. Today, several of the original buildings remain and have been converted to other uses. New residential developments have been built on much of the land. For serving and retired members of the Canadian Forces who called Currie Barracks home, I hope you enjoy this trip down memory lane. For Calgarians who are too young or perhaps never visited the base, I hope this proves interesting and informative.
It's only $50 and it's part of all the other major companies.